Okay, here we go. Let's talk about Shipping Out by David Foster Wallace. I've been reading your folders as you have struggled with this one, and I've seen everything from "this is the most amazing thing I've ever read, I need to read everything this guy wrote" to "this guy is boring and negative and it doesn't make any sense." So before I dig into his writing, I want to kind of talk to you a little bit about irony. Right? According to Bloom, irony is what it's all about. Irony is where we learn and it's where we grow. And so the central irony of this piece of writing is, as a lot of you have figured out, what he is he's on a luxury cruise. And in the midst of all that luxury, where every desire is attended to the extent that maybe he doesn't even have desires, right? Your ability to even choose to feel sad has been removed from you on the cruise. And all of this, of course, because he's a complicated person, makes David Foster Wallace feel sad. Okay, so this is the thing. This is the irony, right? You'd expect, right? So an irony is what you expect versus what is. And this is the situation that David Foster Wallace finds himself in. But because it's wonderfully complex writing, there's an irony in the sadness too. Is that when you explore sadness, which is what he does in this piece of writing, you would expect that the sadness would make you feel sad. But as he explores his own sadness, he does it to such an extreme level that what happens is that it's really funny. So as he is exploring his own sadness and fear and anxiety and dread, what happens is that he creates a world that is very funny to the reader. But even within that world, where everything is very exaggerated and funny, I suspect, as a reader, that there's a lot of honesty in there. That he's being really honest with us, and he's talking about the truth. So it's kind of like the truth wrapped up in a big joke inside of an irony, and so that's a recipe for some great writing. So let's dive into his language a little bit. I'll just start at the beginning with reading. I don't know how much I'm going to get through. I'll just talk for about another 8 minutes, and that'll be that. I have seen sucrose beaches and water of very bright blue. I have seen an all-red leisure suit with flared lapels. I have smelled suntan lotion spread over 2,100 pounds of hot flesh. I have been addressed as "Mon" in 3 different nations. I have seen 500 upscale Americans dance the electric slide. I have seen sunsets that looked computer-enhanced. I have very briefly joined a conga line. So what do we notice here? Well, there's a lot of I in that first paragraph, right? Because reading is all about noticing, and constructing mean as something is about noticing. So I'm noticing that pretty much every sentence here starts with I, and they're all the same construction. I have seen, I did, I have, which is a passive way to construct sentences. But if you look at this, he calls this first section the Full-Color Brochure. And in fact, what he's constructing for us here are little postcards, and he even refers to them later. But what he's also doing is giving us a lot of sensory details. Here we have what I have seen, I have smelled, right? I have been addressed, so that's something that he heard, right? I have seen, I have smelled, I have heard, I have seen, more I have seen. So it's very, very, very visual, and that goes into like the idea that what he's constructing for us are little postcards, or maybe something that could be part of a brochure. All right, moving right along, I have learned that there are actually, and this is all, it's kind of all the same, but it's all these really funny sentences. Here is seen and smelled, right? I know the difference between straight bingo and prizo. This is how he was entertained, right? These are all the things that he did, the things that he saw. I have heard steel drums and eaten conch fritters and watched a woman in silver lame projectile vomit inside a glass elevator. So he's trying to trying to take the reader with him, right? He's taking us where he was. And then and the way he's doing it is brilliant, okay? I'm just going to put it out there. I have pointed rhythmically at the ceiling to the 2/4 beat of the same disco music I hated. Let's see if I can do a little drawing here of a little disco dancer. Well, right, the guy with the one hand in the air, and here's the head, and then one hand is down here, right? This is like the Staying Alive dance, right? The disco, annoying disco dances. I have pointed rhythmically. So he did this, right? And he hated it. He hated it in 1977, and he did it again. Why? Because he was on a cruise. I have learned that there are actually intensities of blue beyond very bright blue. I have eaten more and classier food than I've ever eaten, and done this during a week when I've also learned the difference between rolling in heavy seas and pitching in heavy seas. All right, let's keep on going here. There's a lot of this, right? He just keeps going, and they're very interesting, very creative. I have in 1 week been the object of over 1,500 professional smiles. Right? We can just pick them out. Any one of these sentences is just kind of like, I have burned and peeled twice. I have met cruise staff with monikers like Mojo Mike, Cocoa Puff, and Dave, the Bingo Boy. I have felt the full clothy weight of a subtropical sky. So one of the things that he's doing, and some of you have written about this, is that he's showing off. He's showing us what he can do as a writer, which maybe some people would frown upon, but when you can do things like he can do, I say go for it. I have felt the full clothy weight. That's just such a unique way to describe what it feels like when it's humid and hot and the sky is very bright above you. It's like the air around you feels like it's cloth and it has weight. I have jumped a dozen times at the shattering flatulence of the god sound of a cruise ship's horn. I have absorbed the basics of mahjong and learned how to secure a life jacket over a tuxedo. I have dickered over trinkets with malnourished children. All right, so there's a little something that doesn't sound that fun, right? Dickering is a really cool and very unusual, but it's a way to talk about bargaining. It's just a really interesting choice of a word that is because it's not a very frequently used word, but it is an established verb that means to bargain or argue over trinkets with malnourished children. I have learned what it is to become afraid of one's own cabin toilet. All right, here's a little foreshadowing, because if you wait for it, if you have enough patience, you can enjoy an entire 3-page section later in the essay where he explores his fear of his own cabin toilet in great detail. I now know the maximum cruising speed. He's talking about how big the ship is. And then we have our first footnote. David Foster Wallace is famous for his footnotes, and you have to read them because they are hilarious. Okay, so let's see if we can figure it out. I have acquired and nurtured a potentially lifelong grudge against the ship's hotel manager. So he's talking about conflicts here with people. All right, conflict with people. Mr. whose name was Mr. Dermatis, and whom I now and henceforth christen, is another word, right? This is another interesting way to say it's another word to name. I henceforth christen Mr. Dermatitis, and dermatitis is a skin infection. Okay, so this so he's kind of like, what is he? He's kind of playful, and he is kind of rude, I guess. But why did he call him Mr. Dermatitis? Why would you, it's very childish to take someone and, take their name and make it into a different name. And this isn't a published piece of writing like this, so why would you do this? Oh, okay, let's see. Somewhere he got the impression that I was an investigative journalist and wouldn't let me see the galley, bridge, or staff decks, or interview any of the crew in an on-the-record way. And he wore sunglasses indoors, and epaulets, which are those little things that come off the shoulder. If you're a captain or something, you have I guess these are shoulders, right? They're the little things that have the little sparkly things on the shoulder. And epaulets, and kept talking on the phone for long stretches of time in Greek when I was in his office after I'd skipped the karaoke semifinals in the Rendezvous Lounge to make a special appointment to see him. And I wish him ill. This, by the way, is one grammatically correct sentence. So what we have here is he's a grammar virtuoso, okay? Not many people write entertaining sentences that are this long and that are this grammatically correct, and he does it all the time. And it's not the only thing that he does, but it's another thing that he is known for. Oh my goodness. Okay, here we go. Keep going here. Every conceivable rationale for somebody spending more than $3,000. This is, and then he, to be specific, voluntarily and for pay, I went on a ship. I went on a cruise. And then he talks a little bit about ships. He calls them floating wedding cakes, right? But so this is a little background for the reader as to what he's doing there, right? So he says, so it's clear that maybe he didn't have a good time. So why was he there? Oh, he did it for a job. He did it for money, okay? The food was beyond belief, the service unimpeachable, the shore excursions, shipload activities organized for maximal stimulation down to the tiniest detail. Ship was clean and white. It looked boiled. There we go again with that just kind of virtuosic, a very short sentence, but a very novel, interesting, creative way to say something. You know, the ship was clean. No, it looked boiled. That's how clean it was. The Midwestern Caribbean's blue varied between baby blanket and fluorescent, likewise the sky. Temperatures were uterine. Okay, uterine is like like inside your bodies, like a I don't know if uterine refers to a uterus or if it refers to, I think it refers to a uterus. Anyway, as you can imagine, that would be 98.6 degrees, right? Temperatures were uterine. The very sun itself seemed preset for our comfort. The crew to passenger ratio was 1. Okay, so here he talks about being pampered, you're being pampered to death. So all these are reasons that it was great. So why wasn't it great? Here he talks about this idea of adults being pampered, and maybe there's a problem with that. In fact, he gets at the problem with this funny sentence here. The fact that adult Americans tend to associate the word pamper with certain other consumer product, the other consumer product, of course, being diapers. So again, he's kind of a little bit rude there. With diapers is not an accident, I think, and the connotation is not lost on the mass market megalines and their advertisers. And here he gets to, this is what we would call like the thesis, basically, where he explains what he's going to do in this long essay. And here he talks about how in the midst of all this luxury, he feels sad. And the rest of the essay is his examination of why. And it's funny. It's really, really funny all the time. And sad and funny. And so the big question after this, talk about nuanced emotions, is this essay more sad or more funny? Would be a good question that would be worth investigating. And that's the first 2 pages.